Hi, this week's First Chapter Friday is Simon Sort of Says by Erin, and you can see that this book has won a bunch of awards already. It was a Newbery Honor, it was a long list for the National Book Award, Schneider Family Honor, and it's also on our state Golden Dome Award list for this year. So this one is it's a very funny book. It is a realistic fiction story, and it's about a kid who has experienced a traumatic event at his old school, and so his family moves to a new town where there's no internet and there's no people have no idea what he went through, so he can kind of start fresh. And the stories that he tells people about where he came from and what happened are um, are great. So I'm going to read you a little bit of this story. So this book comes with a content notice. You'll see these, I think, sometimes in books, and they're starting to come out more and more, which I actually think is a good thing. And it's when there's something going on in a book that could potentially be triggering or upsetting to some people, depending on what kind of potential trauma they may have endured. So the content notice on this book says, though this book does not depict violence, it deals with the aftermath of violence, including post-traumatic stress disorder. Resources for anyone seeking mental health help can be found at the end of this book. 1. In which we are driven out of Omaha by alpacas. People are always asking why my family came to the National Quiet Zone. Like we need a reason. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in a place with no internet and no cell phones and no TV and no radio? Who wouldn't want to live surrounded by emu farms in a town that's half astrophysicists and half people who are afraid of their microwaves? I mean, isn't that the American dream? Hint? No. Obviously, there's a story. So when people ask, I tell them we left Omaha because we were driven out by alpacas. Back in Omaha, my dad, who's a Catholic deacon, was the liturgical director at one of the big churches in the suburbs. That means he planned the masses and things, like a wedding planner, but for Jesus. One of the highlights of his year was the Feast of St. Francis, where they bless the animals. The animal blessing can be a little tricky, even when it's just cats and dogs, plus the handful of 4-year-olds who bring gerbils in cages and goldfish in bowls. People aren't always super smart about it. They don't think, they're going to be dogs, so maybe Mr. Tuna should stay in his kitty carrier for the hour-long mass. Usually, at least one cat climbs on at least one head. But the year we had to leave, my dad forgot to make a list of pets you can bring, and, this is the important part, pets you cannot bring. So, in addition to the cats and dogs, there was a pot-bellied pig, 2 alpacas, a giant tortoise, and a great horned owl named Sandy. St. Francis could talk to wolves, but Father Kirk was not so blessed. 3 years ago, a freaked out tomcat named Pinky got spooked by the bulldog in line behind him. He leapt from his owner's arms and took refuge under Father Kirk's vestments. Pinky clawed his way up Father Kirk's leg and, well, let's just say it's a good thing Father Kirk had already taken that vow of celibacy. The Pinky incident marked a real turning point in the relationship between Father Kirk and my dad, who likes to embrace what he calls a little holy chaos when he plans church stuff. St. Francis would probably approve, but Father Kirk did not. And last year, the alpacas, the ones my dad forgot to ban. There were 2 of them, and they were being led up the aisle for a blessing when one of them blinked its cartoon eyelashes and stopped so abruptly that the tortoise, being pulled up the aisle behind them, slid off the back of its dolly and started to make a slow break for freedom. The frozen alpaca stood looking at the altar, and some kind of ancestral memory kicked in about things that used to happen on altars. It stood there blinking its big Bambi eyes, looking cute and seeing blood and knives. And then it made this noise. The noise started low, like someone had sat on a whoopee cushion, but as her owner tugged on her halter, the alpaca started in, whose name was Beth, got louder. She unhinged her jaw and made a noise like a bagpipe gargling. Then the other alpaca started in. and it sounded like angry Scots with chest colds were coming to kill us all. The acoustics were very good in our old church. Sometimes musical ensembles would come and record albums in there. So the noise carried as the alpacas debuted their duet for panicky death visions. The dogs started howling, and the cats started making that noise like opera singers who've been kicked in the privates. And Sandy, the great horned owl, tore away from his owner's glove, circled among the pillars for a moment, then swooped down to eat Mr. Tuna. Father Kirk came dashing down the aisle to help, and the alpaca spit all over his vestments. Sandy, the great horned owl, landed on the altar with Mr. Tuna's body in tow. The media was there. My dad got fired. There aren't many jobs out there for liturgical directors. There wasn't another one in all of Omaha. But my mother is an undertaker, and undertakers can work anywhere. And that's why we came here. Anyway, that's what I tell people. So we packed up our stuff and moved to a little town called, I swear this is true, Grin and Barrett, Nebraska. Grin and Barrett is a one-stoplight kind of town. The kind of town where the funeral home is called Slaughter and Sons, and has been for so long that no one thinks it's weird. The kind of town where people give directions with the words up or down or over and tell you that if you got to the river, you've gone too far. The kind of town where the hardware store is also the drugstore, which also sells various kinds of feeds and animal supplies. So you have to be careful that you don't go in for cough syrup and come out with animal birthing lubricant. It is home to the Grin and Barrett Fighting Badgers, and it is famous for 3 things. First, the name. It's worse than Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, or Come by Chance, Newfoundland, or even Intercourse, Pennsylvania. They call it GNB sometimes, but that doesn't help. Second, it's got this cathedral-sized church, way too big for a dinky little town. As far as I can make out, 100 years ago, a local priest thought he was going to was going to get to be the bishop, but didn't, and somehow convinced people to build him this enormous church as a consolation prize. It's named for St. Barbara, the patron saint of architects, explosives, and people in danger of a sudden death. Third, and the most important by a long shot, Grin and Barrett is surrounded by radio telescopes. We first saw the telescopes from the air. The town council flew us out from Omaha because they were courting my parents pretty hard. Slaughter and Sons, the funeral home, had been without an operator for way too long, and they were so eager to recruit Mom, she started to worry that there was going to be a sketchy backlog in the basement freezers. But it turned out there wasn't, and we were interested because the big church there meant there was work for Dad, too. And of course, I would have moved to Mars if it got me away from what happened in Omaha. When our tiny plane landed, for a second I thought we had. Moved to Mars, I mean. Grin and Barrett is on the Dismal River and on the edge of the Dismal River National Forest. The land's kind of rolling and has lots more trees than you might expect from western Nebraska, though fewer than you might expect from a, national forest. They're scruffy and piney and dark. It was winter when the town council flew us out. We landed around dawn, and there was a mist coming up from the snow, and the pine trees on the hills looked black, and sticking up out of the mist and black rolling hills were these things. Bone white, lighthouse tall, roller coaster complicated, skeleton ghosts in the fog. Radio telescopes. They listen to faint radio signals from space. If you agree to live in Grin and Barrett, or anywhere within a 30-mile radius, hint, there is nothing within a 30-mile radius, you cannot let out any radio signals that might mess them up. When I first heard about that, I thought that meant no radio, and it does. But it also means no television, no cell phones, no microwave ovens, and no internet. When I heard that, I thought, perfect. 2. In which my new 7th grade class learns that a sackbut is a kind of trombone. The hardest thing about moving to Grin and Barrett, Nebraska is not leaving Omaha or giving up the internet or even moving into a house that we frequently share with dead people. Funeral homes in cities are businesses. Funeral homes in small towns are actually homes. The hardest thing about moving to Grin and Barrett, Nebraska is starting a new school in February. Ask anybody, that's the stuff of seventh grade nightmares. G&B is so small that it only has two schools, a grade school called Johnny Carson and a combined junior high and high school called G&B Upper. G&B Upper buses in kids from miles around and it still only has 100-odd students. I imagine every single one of those 100-odd students is going to take a good look at me when I show up for school. A new kid in a place this small? It's like my dad says, there's no blending into an empty field. In addition to being a deacon, my dad likes to make up his own wise sayings. So that's Dad. At least I talked him out of walking me to school like a second grader. Even without my dad holding my hand, I have enough self-consciousness to fuel the robot uprising. When I leave our house, I feel good about my shoes. Red Chucks, good and scuffed, February cold feet, totally worth it. And okay about my Minecraft sweatshirt and my jeans. I'm even reasonably optimistic about my hair, which I managed to get to stick up only in the front. I don't like my stiff and clearly brand new backpack, but I never got the old one back, so I power through it like a champ. The school is down on the river, about a block away from Maine. I scouted the route over the weekend and learned the best way to get there isn't down Main, but up one of the side streets and up to the back of the school. The side streets in G&B are different from the ones in the suburbs where we lived in Omaha. There's something about the way the houses here spill onto the front lawns that makes me think no one in this town has ever locked a door in their life. In the distance, radio telescopes haunt the hills. As I get close to school, my heart starts to pound in my throat, but there's basically no way to get lost, and I arrive with plenty of time before the bell rings. It's weirdly warm considering it's February, the kind of day where in Phoenix they might have on parkas with their shorts, but in Nebraska, a few kids are wearing shorts with their parkas. Outside the school, it's the usual scene, clumps of kids standing around on the sidewalk in the slush, soggy grass. Some guys are straddling bikes by the bike racks, stepping them back and forth like nervous horses. Some girls have spread out their scarves on the concrete and are sitting on the steps that go from the staff parking lot down to the sports fields. They have their knees clamped tight and are blowing on their hands, but there's no way they're going inside. Everybody, the bike boys, the clump kids, the stair girls, all of them turn and watch me go by. I stick my hands in my pockets like, that's fine, heading past the bike racks and along the side of the school. I turn the corner and find the front door and another batch of kids who stare at me. I make it up the steps without tripping or dropping anything or falling prey to any of the other disaster scenarios my brain is working overtime on. My brain, if you haven't got this yet, specializes in disaster scenarios. My dad was worried about me finding the office, but I managed somehow, maybe because it's right inside the door and labeled office. I meet the school secretary, fill out a bunch of forms, totally blank on my new address, fidget with a pen, get stared at like a zoo animal through the office's glass walls as the bell rings and the morning rush comes in, and eventually get introduced to the principal. The principal's name is Ms. Snodgrass, and she looks like she spent her whole life trying to overcome being called Ms. Snodgrass. Like she's got a razor-sharp haircut and a fuchsia motorcycle-style jacket. On her face, she has that look owls always have, like she's bored but suppressing suspicion and rage. She flips open my file. There's not much in it. I was homeschooled all last year, and I asked my parents not to include the records from before that. At a glance, I probably look like a homeschooler, but Miss Snodgrass takes more than a glance, and the look she gives me makes me wonder if she's thinking juvie? Or maybe she thinks all seventh graders are potential criminals. Simon O'Keefe, did you sign the Good Conduct Pledge? I think. I signed like 7 things. She flips through the file until she finds the correct form. It's the goldenrod one. I have signed it. She squints one more time at my name like she might recognize it, but, well, Simon, she says, welcome to Grin and Barrett. We're glad to have you. She smiles, owlishly, like she would totally eat Mr. Tuna. What with all the forms and stuff, homeroom is almost over before I get there. I sneak a peek through the chicken wire glass rectangle in the door of room 9. Apparently, whatever teaching happens in homeroom is also over. From what I can see through the glass, people are just talking or last minute homeworking or doing their hair or whatever. My fingers are cold and my heart is fast, and I think about waiting it out, but that wouldn't help. I just have to go to next class. So I open the door. It creaks. Of course it does. The whole thing is exactly like my brain thought it would be. Everybody's falling silent, everybody's staring. Even the teacher is staring. Going in is like stepping out onto a stage, I swear. So I stay in the doorway. Miss Rose? Definitely got to make sure it's the right class. No way am I going to do this twice. The teacher, a young one with long hair and a long skirt, nods, stands up, and comes over to me. She half smiles. She has a Disney princess sings with the animals look, and takes the slip with my name and schedule out of my hand. She glances at it, then back up at me, her eyes going wide with a familiar expression. The "oh, poor baby" expression. I hate that expression. And oh man, here it comes. Miss Rose reaches out and draws me into the room, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. It's sort of like a hug, except she's also making sure that I'm in exactly the right place for the spotlight to hit me. The shoulder she's holding goes stiff. "Everyone," she says, "everyone, can I have your attention?" I don't know why she even asks. New kid in class is a big deal anywhere, and in Grin and Barrett, it's like the circus has come to town. I stand like the acrobat on the high wire, drum roll and all, trying hard to smile and even harder to make it look casual. The general reaction I'm going for is, "seems okay, I guess," or "yeah, I didn't really notice him," or "Simon who?" I want absolutely nothing more than to be overlooked. But that is so not going to happen. For one thing, Miss Rose isn't having it. "I would like you all to welcome, Simon O'Keefe, who is, his family just moved here from Omaha." The room is swept by a kind of sigh. Omaha, shining land of dreams and promises. Yeah, right. I'm resisting the urge to turn and run out of the room. "Dude," says a boy with green hair in the front row, "why'd you come here?" "There was an incident," says the teacher. I interrupt her. "We were driven out by alpacas. It's kind of a long story." A dozen hands shoot into the air, and the green haired boy says, "Tell it, man." "Simon," says Miss Rose, sounding like she's about to melt into a puddle of sympathy. "Also," I say, before Miss Rose can launch into whatever she's going to tell them, "my mom bought Slaughter and Sons, the old funeral home, which seriously is called that." My words are coming out like there's pressure behind them, and I can't seem to stop talking. Plus, my dad wanted to leave the big city to concentrate on his art. He's a famous sackbut player. Laughter, the kind that can only be called snickering. A football player looking boy turns to the green haired one and mouths, "Sackbut?" "It's a kind of trombone," I say. My dad actually plays one. He's good. He's like the 10th best sackbut virtuoso in the entire world. I think for him the hardest part of leaving Omaha was leaving his medieval music ensemble. "Sackbut," says another boy. "Yeah, I might be getting a new nickname." "Do you live in the funeral home?" asks someone in the back. A girl, breathless with delighted horror, says, "I don't know, a funeral home sounds so creepy." "Would your mom rent it out for school dances and stuff?" asks another girl. She has a 3-ring binder in front of her and a general air of class president. I say, "I could ask?" "Sweet!" exclaims the green haired boy. Right then, the bell rings. The bell is loud. It's a real bell, being hit by a real hammer, sounding like a real emergency, and my body slams backward into the chalkboard, the eraser tray jamming into my hip. But none of the other kids notice. For them, it's just the bell. The room fills up with a burst of voices, a cry of "sack butt," and the zippers of backpacks, and the squeaks of chair legs, and the thump of feet. In the receding tide, Miss Rose looks over my schedule while I rub the bang on my hip with the heel of my hand. "Math is 2 doors down," she says, "room 7. G&B upper, go Badgers, has 2 periods before lunch and 3 after. That means I do the whole thing 5 more times. Miss Rose, homeroom and English, and Mr. Dwyer, the 8-fingered shop teacher, are the only people who make any fuss, thank you God. And thank you, St. Barbara, who I invoke, because I really do think I'm going to die all 5 times. Miss Rose makes her sad eyes and lets me know that her door is always open if I want to talk. Mr. Dwyer hits me on the shoulder and says, "Glad to have you with us now, my son." And it could be he just does that to everyone. It's no reason to panic, brain. And honestly, nothing goes wrong. All the other teachers and all the kids just roll with things. The kid with the green hair is Kevin, and he's just one of those nice guys everyone likes. He's into Minecraft as much as you can in a town with no internet. The big football looking guy is Brett, and he spends a couple days trying to make the nickname Sackbutt happen, but it requires too much backstory and it doesn't stick. The three-ring binder girl is Joyce, and she is on the leadership team. For my first few days, it's a full-time job learning names and finding all the school's hidden corners and cubbies and telling the alpaca story a lot. I answer questions about funeral homes. I answer questions about Omaha. I say the word sackbutt until it loses all meaning. I don't make any friends, really, maybe Kevin, but on the bright side, I don't attract much attention. And there isn't any internet. No one looks me up. So that's the first couple chapters of Simon Sort of Says. If you're intrigued and curious, come check it out at our school library.